Hey, can you run up there and see if you can see me on my little screen? I don't really need my arms much overhead. Cool. Gracias, ma'am. Hello, peoples. The early birdies. How's everybody doing today? Hi, everybody. We'll wait a couple more minutes for people to jump in. Can y'all hear me? Good, awesome, thanks. AirPods are charged, ready to go. And if you are going to be moving during the class and not simply observing, you will need 2 blocks. So if that's not something that you have right now and you want another minute, grab 2 blocks. If you want to be hardcore and you have cork or wood blocks, you can grab those, or you can grab your foam blocks. I'm wishing I had foam blocks, but I only have cork blocks. I'll give people just another minute or two. If you're just joining us and you want to grab 2 blocks, you have the option for cork or wood blocks, and you're feeling like you want a little extra hamstring work today, those would be the blocks to grab. That's not sounding inviting and you have foam blocks, that's fine. If you don't have blocks, don't worry about it. You can always grab a towel or something else to use for some of this work, but you can easily do it without props as well. Okay, well, to save time and make sure we don't run over for y'all, we're gonna get started and anybody else can just jump in as they join us. Hi, I'm Steph or Stephanie. I've met some of you before. If you were part of the July 15th training, then I was with you, I think on your 2nd week for a funky rolling and reaching flow. And if you just started on August 1st, then I have not met you yet, but you may have met one of my teaching partners. So I'm one of the teachers at the Authentic Movement School. We do creative, funky vinyasa style classes with a logical why behind our sequencing that generally stems from some kind of biomechanical intention. And we've been joining once a week, rotating between myself, Bianca Scalise, and Erin Kelly, and highlighting a little bit about the different kind of sequencing that we do, as well as sharing the sequence and doing a little mini sequence analysis after class. So that is essentially what we're going to do today. If you were with me on July 15th, we did a funky flow where we worked our way up to a kind of complex peak transition, and then we incorporated that transition into a peak flow. Aaron was then with you the following week for a handstand variations class, and Bianca was there last week, so even for the August first Friends, for a dynamic movements flow where we brought in a little less engagement and a bit more fluidity, this idea of just kind of flossing through movements. And we're going to finish out this round of training before we start back up again with a workshop. And I say workshop because it really varies based on school what differentiates a workshop versus a class. So this will be about a 75 to 90-minute flow, and it will incorporate some smaller movements where we will hold for longer, but also some more fluidity and dynamic movement flowing, creative prop usage, and we'll work our way to a peak pose variation. So to me, a workshop becomes more of a workshop versus simply a class if we were to advertise that we're specifically working up to something. Today, we are working up to a supported headstand variation. And some of you may be not so excited because you're doing a mainly rocket training and they do all kinds of crazy headstands, and supported headstand might sound really boring to you. And some of you may be thrilled because people have been doing all these crazy headstand variations and you're still working on that supported headstand. So regardless of whether you're doing amazing, crazy, complex headstand transitions with your arms in all different positions, or you're working on your supported headstand, we decided to add this class in as an offering because even if you do crazy headstands in your own personal practice, you may still find it useful to learn some steps and some cues and some engagements that perhaps can help some of your students work their way into supported headstand. Because headstand, while it's generally considered one of the easier inversions, and perhaps it is more simple to find balance in, has an added layer of complexity in that we add in the neck. So yes, some people may be less scared of headstand than they are of something like handstand or forearm stand because they're closer to the ground and they feel like they can find their balance more. That being said, there is this added layer of complexity with the neck, and we'll talk about that as we go through today's class. But as we move, we will be adding in a variety of pose mimics, or some people refer to them regressions and progressions. So we're working our way up to supported headstand, specifically with double stag legs. So both of our legs bent, one knee down, one knee up, heels really curled in towards the sit bone so that we have nice active legs. The idea here is to find more of a neutral pelvis, to find pressure down through the crown of the head. And again, we'll talk about this more in a second. And to be able to stabilize regardless of how far we go in. You never have to go into headstand today. We won't actually go into headstand until the end of class, and then there'll be some fun challenges and things you can do with it. But we'll be focusing more on how can we add in this idea of pose mimicry and this regression. So we're essentially introducing modifications and a lot of the steps and cues necessary for a headstand before we get there, in whether it's a class or a workshop. Because I don't know about you, but it's a lot to fit something like this into a 75-minute or a 60-minute class. And so when you walk in, and maybe you're one of those teachers who's like, what do you guys want to learn today? And those teachers always impress me so much, because then someone says a pose and you have to essentially create a sequence in like 2 seconds in your head. And part of the ability to do that stems from having this repertoire, this toolbox to pull from, and to know that, okay, if I get to supported headstand and I haven't done any prep work here as far as overhead flexion, as far as hugging the elbows towards the midline, crown pressure, relationship of the rib and the pelvis, I'm going to have to spit out like 30,000 cues while these people are like kind of upside down, trying to balance. They're probably only half listening to me while they're kicking wildly in the air. So how can we make it a little bit more fluid by adding in some of that beforehand? That's essentially what we're going to be doing today. So lest I just talk through the whole thing, let's actually get moving. You'll need a mat. You can have a wall nearby if you want. We won't really be using it today, but if it makes you feel better, have a wall. Again, always figure out what makes you feel more comfortable in your practice. You will want 2 blocks. Again, if you have wood or cork block and you're feeling like crushing it today, we will be using the blocks in slightly unusual fashions, specifically to get our hamstrings in on the game so that we're ready for this double stag position. So the heavier the block, the more challenging it will be. If you don't have blocks, you can always use a blanket or a towel for that grab, and it's nice. All right, I'm gonna back up. Let's see if you can see me. And we will get moving. All right, so we're gonna get started today simply lying on the back body, and bring one of your blocks nearby with you. No need to do anything with it, just lie down. Once you lay down, you choose. You can bend your knees and plant the soles of your feet, or extend the legs long, arms however you choose. Take a moment simply to transition into this space, to feel the weight of the pelvis on the ground and the back of the ribs. Again, today we'll be working to a supported headstand variation. We won't actually have the opportunity to get fully upside down with the legs off the floor until the end of class. And then again, it will only be an option. You'll never be required to go fully upside down. There are so many variations of supported headstand, and a lot of this also varies by school. Different schools teach supported headstand in different manners. Some schools teach that in a supported headstand with the forearms down, you're pushing so much through the forearms that you can slide a piece of paper underneath the head, so the crown isn't actually on the ground. Some schools teach the opposite. Push down firmly through the crown or the very top of the head. Today, and generally at Authentic Movements, we tend to teach the variation where you push down firmly through the crown of the head. This is because, yes, we are in a more supported position here, so technically we don't really need the head. You can balance on just the forearms. However, I think of supported headstand as a stepping stone towards the other headstand. Things like tripod headstands, or some of the more wild headstand variations that you might see in Dharma, where not only do the hands move to different strange positions, but you actually move the hands while you're in headstand. And if you're moving the hands while you're in headstand, then a lot of the weight is coming to the crown of the head. So why not work on neck strength and neck stability in a more supported variation, such as supported headstand? If that's not calling to you today to put weight on the crown of the head, you certainly don't have to. If you have a neck injury, that's probably not ideal. But if you have neck injury, I may argue that supported headstand probably isn't the posture that you should focus on for your practice when there's so many other fun poses to choose from. Wherever you are, take a few more soft, natural breaths, simply noticing the direction that your breath moves, where you feel it expanding, perhaps in the belly or the ribs, maybe even the back of the heart, where so much of our lung capacity lies. And as we take those natural exhales, notice the way the low ribs sink back, how everything closes back to a softer, more contracted, neutral position. If your legs are straight and long on the mat, bend your knees and plant the soles of your feet about hip distance apart. They don't have to be up close towards your sit bones. Knees towards the sky. Push down through the heels, just enough to hover the sacrum, the big flat bone at the back of your pelvis, 1 millimeter off the mat. As you hover it, pushing down through the heels, lengthen the tailbone long, lift the pubic bone slightly towards the sternum. Take your hands to your low ribs, exhale. Find that sensation of the low ribs sinking back into the belly. You can think of this as this idea of getting in formation, the tailbone long, the pubic bone lifted, the low ribs sinking in as the core turns on. Keep that position of the pelvis, lower the sacrum down on the floor. The low back does not have to be flat. We can keep the natural curve, that lordotic curve. However, we are limiting it slightly to find a bit more stability in the free-flowing lumbar spine. Leave your left foot as it is and hug your right knee in towards your chest. Give it a squeeze, maybe roll through the ankles. And then grab your block. Take your block, place it on the high setting. And again, I have cork ones, sadly, and squeeze it between the heel and the upper thigh, where the thigh meets the butt, as we often call the thut here at Authentic Movements. Squeeze it. You can flex, point, or flint your toes, doesn't matter. Squeeze the block, heel to thut. You may need to adjust it. If you drop it, don't worry about it. I have a very sad left hamstring, so you'll probably see me drop it on my left side quite a few times today. Keep the formation of the ribs and the pelvis. So think about lengthening the tailbone long so that you turn on your low belly and almost lift your tailbone off the floor 1 millimeter. Beautiful. Arms down by your side. Slowly start to reach the right toes towards the ground, holding your block, and then pick your knee back up closer to your chest. Squeeze the block so it doesn't go flying. Bring the toes down towards the floor. They don't have to touch. Bring the knee back into the chest. Toes down to the floor. Knee back into the chest. One more time like that. Toes down to the floor. Knee back into the chest. So if that's a challenge, you can keep going like that. Adjust your block as needed. If you would like to take this up a notch, you have some choices. You can pick up your head, neck, and shoulders and move the foot. You can hover your right leg, left leg, taking it up to the sky. That's going to make it easier to keep the setting of the pelvis. Or if you want more of a challenge, extend the left leg, hovering 1, 2, 3, 4 inches off the ground as you squeeze your block. And lower your toes to the floor and lift. Lower, lift. 2 more, however you are. Lower, lift. Keep the formation. Lower, lift. Reach down, remove the block. Keep the left leg straight. Cross the right leg over towards the left. Take a nice spinal twist. You have your block, so if you'd like to rest your right knee on your block, you can. Keeping both shoulder blades down if that feels okay. Soften back in after that small heating episode. So we'll be revisiting this thut grab with the block frequently throughout class to remind ourselves of how important the activation of the legs is in this headstand variation, So often we just let the legs flap around, whether they're bent or straight. We can have this muscular engagement, and that's going to help actually us feel lighter and more balanced. Unwind, plant the soles of both feet on the mat here again. Have your block nearby because we have to do the other side. Push down through the soles of your feet. Get in formation. So lengthen that tailbone down. Lift up through the pubic bone. Soften the low ribs in. Keep that the same. Pull the left knee in towards the chest. Give it a squeeze. Roll the ankle. Enjoy this for a moment. You may find you have one side that's very different than the other. Again, I know I certainly do. Left hamstring does not like to play at the party. Grab your block. Bite it between your heel and your foot. And if you need to move it around a little bit, find a better place to get a grip on it, you can. Again, exploring what's better, pointed, or flexed foot. Lower the left toes towards the floor, and then pull the knee back into the chest. Lower the left toes towards the floor, pull the knee back into the chest. Keep the formation, so the low back is pressing down. Doesn't have to be flat here, but it is solidifying and protecting through that lumbar spine. You can take your hands to your belly if you want to make sure it's turned on, or just keep them down by your sides, pressing the forearms into the earth. All right, you have a choice. Keep doing them like that. Lift up through the head, neck, and shoulders. Take the right leg to the sky, or hover the right leg 1, 2, 3, 4 inches off the floor as we continue with our toe lowers and lift. Lower, lift. Lower, lift. 2 more wherever you are. As you finish, grab the block, release the right leg to the ground, cross the left knee over towards the right, and come into your spinal twist on this side. Again, letting your shoulder blades rest on the mat. Letting the heat you created disperse just a little bit before we bring more into play. Unwind. You don't need your block right now. Set your feet back up, planted on the mat, knees towards the sky, about hip distance, but not too important here. Set your formation, lengthen through the tail, lift up through the pubic bone. Exhale, soften the low ribs back in. Take your arms up overhead into supported headstand arms. So interlace the fingers. Again, you're not going to be able to get your forearms or your upper arms all the way up by your ears, but press the fists into the floor and hug your elbows towards the midline. Keep the formation of the ribs and the pelvis. Lift up through the hips by pressing down through the heel. So a little glute bridge. We're not trying to do any kind of back bend here. Push down through the heel, length through the tailbone, and squeeze the butt. Slowly lower, keeping the pelvic positioning, keeping your formation, and then lift back up. Push down through the heels as you lower. Push down through the heels as you lift. Hug the elbows towards the midline. They have a tendency to run away. Lower down through the hips, tailbone long, lift up. Lower down, lift up. One more time like this, lower down, lift up to hold. Hold your hips up, release your arms down by your side into robot arms. Okay, so choice. You can stay here and hold this glute bridge if this is calling to you. If you want to take it up a notch, push down through your left heel, keep the length of the tailbone, and pull your right knee in towards your chest. Single leg glute bridge. Lower the hips to the floor. Push down through the left heel, lift them up. Keep the right thigh pulled into the chest to set the pelvis. Lower down, lift up. Lower down, slower than you want to. Lift up, keep the tailbone long. Lower down, lift up. One more time, lower down, lift up to hold. Like you're moving through water, kick the right heel away from you. Pull it back in, squeezing the thigh to your low belly. One more time, kick the right heel away from you. Pull the thigh in. Slowly release both feet and your hips to the mat. Hello, left butt. Let the knees knock in, and set your feet wide for just a moment here. Whew. So the reason we're doing this double stag positioning is because, yes, it helps to have one leg or one knee reaching towards the sky to help lift us up. But keeping the other thigh really close, finding the compression of the thigh to the low belly, helps us keep the pelvis in more of a neutral position, which is a big tendency in headstand, that we go into more of that anterior tilt and we lose core integration. Okay, let's do the other side. Set your feet back up for success. Get in formation, lengthen through the tailbone, lift up through the pubic bone. Bring your hands back to supported headstand. So interlace the fingers, hug the elbows in, push the fists into the floor. Push the back of the skull gently into the floor. Keeping the length of the tailbone, press through the heels and lift the hips up. Light glute bridge, no back bend. Slowly lower down, pushing through the heels. Lift back up. Keeping the neutral pelvis the whole time if you can. Lower down. Lift up. Thinking about the pubic bone reaching towards your sternum. Lower down. Lift up. Slower than you want to, both on the up and the down. Lower. Lift. Lower. Lift. Lower. Lift and hold. Take your arms down by your side, robot arms, length through the tailbone, leave the right foot planted, hug the left knee in towards the chest, just using the strength of the hip flexor. Keep the length of the tailbone, lower the sit bones down, and lift, push through the right heel. Lower the sit bones down, use that glute to lift you up. Lower down, lift up, lower down, lift up, lower, lift, tailbone long, one more, lower, lift, hold the lift, slow motion, kick the left heel away from you. Pull the thigh back into the belly. Kick the left heel away from you. Pull the thigh back into the belly. Release down onto your pelvis. Feet on the floor, let the knees knock in. Phew. Okay, we evened ourselves out. If it feels good to windshield wiper your knees from side to side, please do so. Pull both knees into the chest, widen them towards your armpits, soles of the feet towards the sky. Happy baby, any grip with the hands that's calling to you. Any movements that are calling to you, or stillness. Grab behind the thighs and begin to rock up and down along the back body. Rock all the way until you can roll over the shins and come to tabletop pose. Bring your blocks somewhere towards the top of the mat, just so they're available for you. In your tabletop, start to stretch the wrists, turning them in different directions. Adding in any motions that feels good to you. We actually won't do too much wrist work today, but we do have a few downward facing dogs. So it can be nice to give your wrists a little bit of love. Plus, I'm sure they've been working hard for you with all the rocket and inversion classes. So hopefully this gives your wrists a little break today while we destroy your hamstrings in a good way. So often we stretch the hamstrings in yoga, but they often need a bit of strengthening. If you want to invite in any light cat-cow here, you can. Great. From your tabletop, look down at your hands. Replace them with your elbows. Forearm tabletop. Find your formation here in that forearm tabletop. What that's going to look like is lengthening slightly through the tailbone, lifting up through the low ribs, and pressing the ground away. You don't need this big cat puffy spine, but a little bit of push down through the elbows. Now, just like in headstand, hug those elbows in towards the midline. Great. Let's take a few cat-cows here. Inhale, pull the heart through. Let the pelvis tilt forward, but pull the navel towards the spine. As you exhale, tuck the chin in, push the ground down and away. Inhale, pull the heart through. Exhale, push and puff, cat spine, hug the elbows in. Inhale, pull your heart through. Exhale, push and puff. Come back to a neutral spine. Find headstand arms. So interlace the hands, place them down, hug the elbows towards the midline. Let's continue our cat-cow motion. Inhale, heart through. Exhale, push and puff, tuck. Place the crown of the head, the tippy top of the head down between your elbows. If it doesn't touch, don't worry about it. If it does touch, push it down firmly. Lift it up. Inhale, pull the heart through for cow. Exhale, push and press the back of the heart towards the sky. Let the head hang. Then press the top of the crown into the mat as you hug the elbows in. Lift the crown. Inhale, pull the heart forward. Exhale, push and puff. Place the crown down, hug the elbows in. Push through the crown of the head, push through the forearms. Hug the elbows to the midline. Great job. Lift the head, find a neutral spine. Take your arms back to parallel and have one of your blocks nearby. Get in formation here, push the ground away, lengthen through the tailbone. Keep everything the same, except take one of your blocks and put it in your right foot. Oh no, we're here again. Squeeze, block to the upper thigh. And again, if it falls out, I'm sure mine will a few times, just grab it and bring it back. And if this ever gets to be too much, well, just get rid of your block and think about squeezing the heel towards your sit bone. Find some elevation in the shoulders. Push down through the elbows. Hug the elbows towards the midline. Keep both shoulders facing forward. Keep both hips pointing towards the ground. Keep your formation. Lift the right knee off the ground. Take itty bitty pulses of the right toes towards the sky, hugging the right knee towards the midline, keeping the hips evenly pointing towards the mat. Push down to the arms. Suck the low ribs in. Little pulses, small. Squeeze your block. We're here for 5, 4, 3, 2, breathe. Take an inhale. Exhale, pull your knee in towards your nose. It doesn't have to touch. Cat through the spine, nose towards the knee. Inhale, neutral spine, no back bend. Exhale, pull your nose to your knee. Neutral spine, no back bend. Last time, pull your nose to your knee. Great. Keeping your block, release your right knee to the floor. Step your left foot back so your left leg is straight. Now you have a choice. We're going to hold a forearm plank for a moment. You can do so with your right knee on the floor, or you can pick up your right knee, squeezing your block. Get your hips a little bit lower, puff slightly through the back of the heart, hug your elbows in. Beautiful. Release your right knee down. Keep the left leg straight. Take your left forearm and kink it towards the midline for balance. Inhale the right arm up, cactus. Exhale, weave it underneath just to reach. We're not relaxing here. Inhale, cactus. Exhale, weave it underneath. Still squeezing the block, cactus. Underneath. One more time. Cactus. Underneath. And if you want to rest your right cheek down, you can. Still squeezing our block, of course. We won't be here for long. Another breath or so. Next natural inhale, cactus the right arm towards the sky. Release your right arm down. Step your left knee back. Relieve your right hamstring by taking the block out. Any motions of the leg that are calling to you here, because guess what? We do have to do the other side. So first, get yourself in formation. Parallel arms, push the ground away, pull the low ribs in, neutral pelvis. Everything stays the same, except we take the block now into the left heel crease, so near the Achilles tendon, and then of course the thud. Shoulders face forward, pull the low ribs in, both hip bones point down, pick up the left knee, pulse those left toes towards the sky. Man, my left hamstring is so naughty. I like to use the excuse that they took my ACL in my knee from there when I tore it a long time ago, but that was like 2 decades ago, so that seems a little bit cheap of an excuse at this point. Pulse. Tug your right hip back towards the midline. Hug your elbows in if they went for a walk like mine. We're here for 5, 4, 3, 2, freeze. Take an inhale. Exhale, left knee to nose. They don't need to touch. Cat the spine. Inhale, long spine, no back bend. Exhale, left knee to nose. Inhale, long spine, no back bend. Exhale, last time, left knee to nose. Release to neutral, place your left knee down, step your right foot back. Again, you have the choice. We're just going into that forearm plank for a moment. You can leave your left knee down, or you can pick it up, send the hips a little bit lower. Push down through the ground and hug your elbows in. Lower the left knee to the floor. Kink your right forearm over 45 degrees for balance. Squeeze your butt. Cactus the left arm. Exhale, weave it underneath. Reach it to the right. Inhale, cactus. Exhale, reach it underneath. Inhale, cactus. Exhale, reach it underneath. Inhale, cactus. Last time. Exhale, reach it underneath. And if you'd like to rest here with the other cheek on the ground, still squeezing your block, go for it. I don't know if this can be really considered rest. One more breath here. Inhale, left arm back to cactus. Exhale to neutral. Bring your right knee in. Bring your left knee in. Reach back for your block. Bring it to the top of the mat and come onto your belly. Whew! I don't know about you, but I'm pretty warm already. Shake out the legs. I have been doing yoga all day though, so that might be why. Take one of your blocks to the top of your mat. We're going to do some locust pose variations here with the block. And again, we talked about how we're doing the variation of supported headstand, where we do want to press down through the crown so that we can use it as a stepping stone towards other headstands where you have no choice but to use your head as kind of the main weight-bearing point. So let's practice with maybe not the weight of the whole body, but instead pressing the crown into the block itself. So arms out in front of you, also a nice little shoulder stretch. Place the block at the crown of the head. Take a minute to find what the crown actually is. It's not your forehead, it's not your temple, it's not the back of your head, it's the very top of your head. You can rest down with your elbows wide for a moment. You can actually rest your face on the ground. I'm not going to because then you won't be able to hear me, but let the elbows come wide. When we lift off the ground, we will hug them towards the midline. And I recognize this is an exact mimic of the position of your arms overhead, but right now we're focusing on the pressure of the crown. Push down through the top of the feet. Engage the knees. Push the pubic bone down into the mat, and notice how that brings you into that formation as you lengthen the tailbone down and lift up to the low belly. Low body is not going to lift off the ground, so the legs stay grounded. Press the crown into the block. Take an inhale. Take an exhale, glue down through your feet. Inhale, lift up through the upper body. Hug your elbows in towards the midline. Don't go very high here. Think about pushing the crown of your head into the block and give your head feedback by pushing the block back in. Hug the elbows in. Hug the elbows in. Lift up a little higher. Hug the elbows in. Keep the feet grounded. Push down through the pubic bone and squeeze the butt. Lift up a little higher. Hug the elbows in. Keep the pubic bone grounded. Squeeze the butt. One more inhale. Exhale, release. Rest one cheek on the mat here for a moment. So as we go through the second round, you have the option to do it exactly the same way, or you can also lift your feet off the ground. I don't really care if they're together or hip distance apart. Just think about lifting up through the inner thighs so the hips stay square to the ground. So set up your formation. Push down through the pubic bone. Notice how that changes my pelvis. Length through the low back so that the bend goes up higher, even if it's less bend. Take your head down to the floor for a moment. Grab your block. Take an inhale. Take an exhale. And as you inhale, lift everything off the mat. Press the crown of your head into the block. Hug your elbows in towards the midline. Think about reaching long through your toes or your heels, depending on how your feet are, and pushing the block with the crown of the head. Hug your elbows in, push the block. Hug the elbows in, push the block. Did you lose the connection of your pubic bone down into the mat? I did. Push down through the pubic bone to lengthen through the low back. Hug the elbows in. Push the block into the head into the block. Reach the crown of the head and the heels or the toes in opposite directions. One more inhale. Exhale, release. Rest the other cheek down on the mat. Whew. Great job, guys. Let's relax into child's pose. Push back to child's pose, maybe with the knees a little bit wide and the arms forward. Rest the forehead down on the mat. Again, I'm just not going to do that so that you can hear me, but feel free to rest your forehead down on the mat. Notice the connection of your low belly to your thigh. This compression, this space that we eliminate between the upper leg and the low belly. And how it really does help to set our pelvis in more of that neutral or even slightly posterior position. All right, supported headstand has a lot of overhead flexion of the shoulder. Even if it's not quite as much as something like forearm stand, when we add in the bend of the elbow, it can be a lot for a lot of people. So let's focus on this idea of active mobility here of the shoulders, instead of just sinking into a stretch like puppy pose or maybe downward facing dog with really open shoulders. Let's think about using the muscles of the arms and the shoulders to lift us into this stretch. Keeping your forehead down, bring some attention and activation to your arms. Maybe you reach them further away from you and push your fingertips down and away so that your sit bones come closer to your heels. It's okay if they don't touch, but think about them grounding towards your heels. If they do touch, keep them there. Nothing changes, but see if you can hover the right arm off the ground. Even if it doesn't hover, think about it just getting a little bit lighter. So forehead's down, left fingertips are down, hover the right arm off the ground. Maybe you pulse the thumb towards the sky. Active mobility, fighting against gravity, using the muscular positions to pull ourselves into the form that we want, which is overhead flexion of the shoulder. Release the right arm down. Let's switch it out. Extend the left arm long, hovering it off the floor. The thumb towards the sky. Forehead's down, right fingers are down, sit bones glued towards the heels. And release. You can guess where we're going next. If one arm was like, whoa, that is not pleasant for me, then stick with the one arm. If you'd like to go for both arms, that's what we're going to do. Press the forehead gently into the mat. But if this is too straining on the neck, let's just focus on one arm at a time. If not, Gently push the forehead down. Keep the sit bones glued to the heels and lift both arms off the mat. Pulse the thumbs towards the sky. Keep the connection of the sit bones down towards the heels. Just a gentle pressure of the forehead into the mat as you lift the arms up. Tiny, itty bitty pulses of the thumbs towards the sky. We're here for 5, 3, 2, 1. Release your arms. Whew. Relax into just a nice, soft, lazy child's pose. Be there. Find the compression of the thighs to the belly for one more breath. Okay. Round forward into tabletop. Let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, great. Tuck your toes and send your hips up and back, downward facing dog. Take any motions that are calling to you here in your downward facing dog. So maybe that means stillness, no motion, or maybe pedaling it out, or shifting the hips one side to another, getting a little stretch here, giving your hamstrings a little love if they're calling for some stretch. They will be getting some more tough love in a few moments. Start to find a bit of stillness in your downward facing dog. Micro bend the knees. Push the hands down and away from you, letting the shoulders come up out of the ears. Take your gaze up slightly towards your thumbs. Pull the low ribs in. Exhale, find your formation. Lower your right forearm so your elbow falls right behind your right wrist. Now pick it up. Lower your left forearm. Pick it up. Right forearm, up. Left forearm, up. You can go back and forth like that, or if you'd like to lower both forearms and lift, do so. As you lower them, hug the elbows towards the midline. They have a tendency to go really wide. Lift and lower. Lift and lower. One more time. Lift and lower. Stay here in your dolphin pose. Bring your hands into headstand hands. So interlace the fingers, hug the elbows towards the midline. Beautiful. Let's do a few dolphin push-ups here. Micro bend the knees or even place a more generous bend in the knees. Keep the formation of the ribs and the pelvis, so pull the low ribs up. As you inhale, tilt forward, tap your nose to your fingers, and as you exhale, push back and get a stretch. Hug the elbows in the whole time. Inhale forward, tap. Exhale back, hug the elbows in. Inhale forward, tap. Exhale back. Inhale, push up. Exhale, press back. Inhale forward. Exhale back. 5 more, your breath. As you finish, lower your knees and come to a seat for just a moment because I want to demonstrate one quick movement that is perhaps a bit unusual, but it's a lot of fun. So we're going to hop from a single leg dolphin with parallel arms up to lizard pose. What that looks like, and it can feel a little scary at first. So again, just watch, we'll go through it in a second. We'll lift one leg, bend the heel in, pretend we're squeezing a block. And in fact, we'll kink our left forearm over and carefully reach back to tap our knee because we'll need that motion in the future. And then reset to our parallel arms. From here, keeping the heel really close to the sit bone, bending into the bottom knee, I want to think about this springing action. I'm going to end up in lizard with my right foot outside of my right hand. But I want to think about my knees pulling in opposite directions. So as my left heel goes back, my right knee is going to go forward. Find your buoyancy in your spring and hop, pulling the legs apart. So we'll do this a few times. From here, bend, and as the spring up, the forearms come up, but it's the legs pulling apart in opposite directions that are going to give us this tension that we need to land. All right, let's try it. So come into your dolphin with parallel arms. Great. Lift your right leg back behind you. Keep the hips square. Curl the heel in towards the sit bone like you were holding that block. Hug your knee in. Gaze forward. Look where you're going. It makes things less scary. Come up high on the left toes. Bend into the left knee. That's your spring. Take an inhale. Use the contractive power of your exhale spring forward, come up onto your hands, right foot lands outside. Ooh, nice, guys. Step it back, let's do it again. Parallel arms, dolphin, right leg lifts. Heel towards the sit bone, bend in the knee. One springing motion, maybe on your exhale. Take a deep inhale. Exhale, right foot springs forward. Nice, let's do it one more time. Dolphin, right leg lift. Bend the right heel towards the sit bone. Bend left leg to load your spring. And on your exhale, lizard, pop it forward. Great, lower your back knee. Half splits with the front leg outside of the right hand. Think about cat spine here. So take an inhale, and then as you exhale, push the ground down and away, pop up through the back of the heart. As you inhale, lead through the crown of the head and pull forward. So not through the chin or the sternum, lead through the crown, like you're pressing into the block like you did in your locust pose. Exhale, push down and away, puff up through the back of the heart. Inhale, pull forward. Exhale, puff. Inhale, pull forward. Exhale, puff. All right, this time we're sliding all the way back to downward facing dog. Inhale, pull the heart forward, lead with the crown. Exhale, push and puff, lift through the back leg. Squeegee the right leg back. Downward facing dog. We're only here to lower the knees and come back to a seat. Setting up for headstand prep. We will not be going up into headstand at this time. Please don't go up into headstand. You'll have time to play with that later. Take your hands, interlace them, hug your elbows towards the midline. It is up to you whether you smash the palms together or you open the palms, placing the back of the head more in the hands, or you leave a little space. I tend to leave a little space so I have straight lines of the wrist. Straight lines are strong lines, as we say of authentic movements. So I like a small space, and then I place the crown of my head in between my forearms. You choose what works best for you. Again, we are not going up into headstand. Take your arm position. Place it as close to your knees as you feel comfortable with, knowing that you still have to put the crown of your head on the floor. So for some people, this is a lot of rounding and compression. You might need to move the forearms up. If you can put them closer to the knees, do it, because you're going to stack your hips higher and you'll have less work to do. Place the crown of the head down between the forearms. Hug the elbows in. Tuck the toes, lift the hips. Keep at least a small bend in the knees. Walk the toes in, bending the knees to stack the hips over the shoulders, not going up into headstand. Hug the elbows in. Push through the crown of the head. Are you really on the crown of the head? Push through the forearms. Lift the shoulders away from the floor. Now, not going up into headstand. Curl your right heel in towards your sit bone. If that feels good, maybe you lift your right knee towards the sky, keeping the hips square, not going up into headstand. Lift your right knee towards the sky. Curl the heel towards the sit bone like you're squeezing your block. Push down through the crown of the head. Push down through the forearms. Slowly release your right foot to the floor, knees to the floor. Soften down into a child's pose. As if you had a marble in front of your nose, push the marble forward and drip your way up to a seat. Always taking care after we've had a lot of pressure on the neck, especially if we're not used to it, to slowly bring ourselves down. Okay, we got to do the other side of those pouncy lizards. Come back to your dolphin with parallel forearms. Pouncy lizard on the other side. Left leg lifts, keep the hips square, curl the heel in towards the sit bone. Left knee in towards the midline, gaze where you're going, that's forward. Bend into your right knee, take an inhale. Exhale, spring into lizard, left leg forward, top of the mat. Step it back, let's do it again. Forearm, dolphin, the only kind of dolphin, I guess. Left leg lifts, curl the heel in towards the sit bone. Gaze forward, take an inhale, bending into the right knee. Exhale, spring forward, left foot outside of left hand. Fabulous, one more time. Step it back. Left leg lifts, bend the knee, bend the right knee, look forward. Exhale, spring forward, lizard pose. Great. Lower the back knee, half splits with the left leg outside of the left hand. Hands a little bit forward, even if that means we're a bit rounded. You can always put them on blocks if this is not comfortable for you. Take an inhale here, pulling the crown forward. And then as you exhale, push and puff, ducking the head. Inhale, pull the crown forward, tugging the hands back. Exhale, push and puff. Pull the crown forward. Push and puff. Pull the crown forward. Push and puff. One more time. We're going to slide back to down dog. Pull the crown forward. Push and puff, lift through the right knee, squeegee the left leg back, downward facing dog. Lower the knees, come to a seat. Again, doing our headstand prep. We are not going up, we're simply doing the other side. Interlace your hands, hug the elbows in. You choose what's happening with your wrists, open, smash, close, maybe slightly in between. There's lots of variations in support headstand. We're just doing this variation today, but if another one calls more to you, go for it. Place your elbows and your forearms down as close to your knees as it feels comfortable. Take the crown of your head, tuck it, place the crown down, tuck the toes, lift the hips, walk the feet in. Great job. Now, pushing down through the forearms, pushing down through the crown of the head, lift the shoulders away from the ears slightly. Curl the left heel in towards the sit bone. If that feels okay, maybe you lift the left knee to the sky, coming high onto the right tippy toes. Hug the elbows in, push down through the crown, push down through the forearms, pull your navel in and up. Notice how because we have our right thigh to our belly, we can't really do anything crazy with our pelvis. Even though the left knee is lifted towards the sky, hug an imaginary block. Slowly lower the left foot to the floor. Lower both knees to the floor. Child's pose. Again, you have a marble in front of your nose. Push it forward, gaze up, and come up to a seat. Okay. Take your hands in front of you. Downward facing dog. Let's hop to the top of the mat in sumo squat. So a little bit wider stance. Inhale, high to the toes. Exhale, bend the knees, look forward. Hop to the top of the mat. Feet wide, maybe slightly turned out, whatever's comfortable for you. Coming into a sumo squat position. Okie dokie. We have more block torture. Grab one of your blocks. We'll be rotating between block pressing into the crown, which again is the top of your head, very top of your head, as well as grabbing the block and our hamstrings to prepare for what would be our final little flow. So we'll do a couple drills here, and then we'll put it into a flow that we'll go through slowly on each side and then a little bit faster. And if it gets confusing with the block, don't worry about it. You can always get rid of the block. You can skip any postures that aren't calling to you. We love at Authentic Movements that things get a little complex, not just in the cueing, but also in your mind and how you have to make things work. Where is your body on the mat? What is it doing? So I get it. It's a lot to think about, especially if you're not used to this kind of class. Take the block to the crown of the head, push it into the crown of your head, hug your elbows in towards the midline. Again, I realize that headstand position, the arms are more like here. It's okay. It's a mimic. It doesn't have to be perfect. Pull the elbows in. Find your foundation. Small bend in the knees. Lengthen the tailbone down, lift up through the pubic bone. We're going to keep that even as we do some squatting. We're not going to tuck the butt under, but we're going to think about more neutral pelvis, which for a lot of us feels like a slightly posterior. All right, so keep the elbows hugging in, lower down into your sumo squat. You can let your torso tip forward. Pick it up, slow motion, kick the right leg forward, lower your down into your sumo squat. Kick the right leg forward, sumo squat. Push the block into your head into your block. Kick, squat, kick, squat. One more time, kick, squat. This time, kick, pull the knee in, take the block. Okay, here we are, nasty bits. Put the block in your right foot, heel to butt. Set your foundation, and notice how that maybe gets a little bit more challenging. When we're here, we're like, oh, it feels better to just like be here. I know it does. Make it harder. Get in formation. Okie dokie. Take headstand hands now, pulling your elbows and your upper arms closer towards your ears. We'll rotate between a bent leg, warrior three, bent in both legs, tilt the torso forward, to Utthita Asana Padangusthasana, standing with the knee slightly in. Tilt forward. Whoa. Tilt back. I'm losing my block, guys. Regrip your block as needed. Tilt forward. Tilt up. One more time. Forward, doesn't have to go all the way, and up. Reach, grab your block, take it out, shake it out. Okay, let's do the other side. Here's where, if you have foam blocks, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, and if you have cork or wood, you're like, maybe not. That was the wrong decision. Unless you have super awesome hamstrings, then I'm jealous. Okay, so setting up for the other side, but first, we have our squat kicks with our block to our head. Hug the elbows in, get in formation. Set up your stance for your sumo squat. Elbows in, squat, kick the left leg out, squat, lift, kick the left leg out, squat, lift, kick the left leg out, squat, lift, keep the left leg out, squat, kick last time, squat, kick, hold, pull the left heel in. Take your block and hug it in your left foot. Hands to headstand. Tilt the torso forward, keep a bend in the right knee. Pick the torso up. So we're going from our bent leg warrior 3 with the block grab to a standing position. Pick it up, headstand arms. Tilt, lift, last time. Tilt, lift. Grab the block, release. So we're only going as far into this tilt as we can still maintain that formation, still maintain that neutral position of the pelvis. So for me, if I go all the way up to a warrior 3, it ends up looking something like this, which is really just anterior tilt. So in order to be more neutral, I need to keep my leg higher. Now you might not be that case. You might have stronger hamstrings and glutes and have a little bit more hip extension and be able to open up. But just be wary that it's not about getting to parallel. It's not about getting to that warrior 3 position that you're used to. It's about keeping this relationship from here to here. Okay, so we're now gonna do our final flow. Again, I'm gonna do a quick demo of it just so you know what's coming next. We've done pretty much all of the pieces of it before, but I do want you to see it first. So I will demo it and then we will do it together, slow the first time and picking up speed as we go. Again, how am I doing on time? Ooh, not so bad. So what it will look like, just watch for a second. You can stand or sit or whatever's calling to you. From Malasana, so we'll change up the elbows a little bit. From Malasana, reach down with your elbows, hugging towards the midline, and grab your block. If that doesn't work, well, you have 2 blocks. So you can stack one block on the other one so you can grab it a little bit easier. But if you want more compression, grab your block. Come to your sumo squat. Squat, kick, 2, 3, grab the block, put it in the foot. Here we are again, headstand arms, 1, 2, and then on the third one, we'll take our hands down, carefully squeezing the block, lower the back knee. Send the leg out straight, we've been in this position. Lower to your forearms. You have the choice here, forearm plank, or you can keep your knee down, lower down, Sphinx. Keep the knee planted so that you can sit the hips up and back, dolphin. Here's that position. Reach back, grab the block, shoulder stability, take it to the front of the mat. We're here in this position. We'll spring into our lizard, grab the block, pick it up, crown of the head, tilt forward, roll over the back toes. Keeping formation, the tendency here is gonna just be to go into a back bend. Keep formation, lift up the back leg a few times, pull that knee in, squat down into our Malasana, and do the other side. Okay? Again, if all the block nonsense gets confusing, you can always let go of the block or skip any portions that you want. But if you want to go for it, we'll go for it. We'll go through slowly once and then quickly on both sides. Not too fast, not too slow. Medium and then a little faster. All right, start in Malasana with your block available to you. Again, if you want to stack your other block on top, that's a great idea. If you drop your block at any point in time, just grab it. All right, use your elbows, pick up your block, lift to sumo squat. It can be a small squat. Squat, kick the right leg out. Squat, kick the right leg out. Squat, kick the right leg out. Okay, curl the right heel in, take the block, squeeze it between the heel and the right foot. Get a good grip on it. Maybe you take headstand hands. Maybe you just take your hands to heart center. Tip the torso forward. Bent leg warrior 3. Pick it up. Tilt the torso forward. Bent leg warrior 3. Pick it up. Last time, tilt the torso forward. Place the hands down. Carefully bend into the left knee. Lower the right knee to the floor. Step the left leg back. Lower to your forearms. Forearm plank, maybe you lift up through the right leg, still grabbing the block. And no, it's hard. Lower your hips. Forearm, Sphinx, grabbing your block. Great. Now from here, To get back to dolphin, I have to press my right knee down and reset my left foot to lift myself up. You can do that however you want. Kink your left forearm in. Carefully reach your right arm back. Slower than you want to. Grab your block. Take it to the front of your mat. Parallel forearms. Right leg is bent and lifted. Here's our springy lizard. Look forward. Bend your knee. Hop and pounce the right foot outside of the right hand. Nice. Grab your block. Lift it up. Crescent pose. Press your block into the crown of your head. Hug your elbows in. Tilt forward 45 degrees. Get in formation. Take an exhale. Pull your low ribs in. Roll over the back foot. Change nothing. Keep a bend into the right leg and lift the back leg off the ground. Tap it down. Lift. Keep your formation. Tap it down. Lift. Hug the elbows in. One more time. Tap it down. Lift. Come up to stand. Pull the left knee through. Lower down. Malasana. Place your block on the floor. Heck yes. Let's do the other side, yeah? Let's do it. Reach down. Grab the block with your elbows. Lift up to a sumo squat. Find your stance. Find your formation. Squat. Kick the left leg. Squat. Kick the left leg. One more time. Squat. Kick the left leg. Curl the left heel towards the sit bone. Block. Left foot. Oh no, the left leg. Take your hands to headstand, or maybe your hips, or to heart center. Tilt it forward. Pick it up. Small motions if you need to. Tilt it forward. Keep a bend in the right leg. Pick it up. Tilt it forward. Place the hands down. Slower than you want to. Bend into the right knee and lower the left knee. Send the right foot to the back of the mat. Lower down onto your forearms. Squeeze your block. Forearm plank. Lower down. Sphinx. We still have our block. Adjust as you need to get back up to dolphin with the left leg lifted. Still holding our block. Kink the right forearm in. Lower than you want to. Reach the left arm back. Shoulder stability. Grab your block. Put it at the top of your mat. Parallel arms, dolphin. Left knee is lifted. Springy lizard. Look forward. Bend into the right knee. As you exhale, pop. Left foot outside of your left hand. Nice. Grab your block. Come up. Crescent pose. Block to the crown of the head. Hug the elbows in. Tilt the torso forward 45 degrees. Roll over the back toes. Bend into the left knee. Hug the elbows in. Lift up through the right inner thigh. Tap. Lift up. Tap. Last time. Lift up. Come to stand. Pull the right knee through. Lower down Malasana. One more time each side. Squat. Put the blocks between your elbows. Stand. Sumo squat. Here we go. Right side. Squat. Kick the right leg. Squat. Kick the right leg. Squat. Kick the right leg. Curl the right heel in. Take the block to the foot. Headstand arms down by your side. Heart center. Tilted forward. Pick it up. Warrior three. Bent leg. Left leg. Pick it up. Tilt it forward. Place the hands down. Squeeze the block so you don't lose it. Lower the right knee down. Step the left foot back. Lower your forearms. Forearm plank. Lower your hips. Sphinx. Adjust as needed carefully to get back up to your dolphin with the right leg lifted. Kink your left forearm over. Reach back. Grab the block. Put it at the top of the mat. Parallel forearms. Pouncy lizard. Right leg is lifted. Look forward. Inhale. Exhale. Load your spring. Pop. Right foot outside of right hand. Pick up the block. Crescent pose. Place the block to the crown of the head. Hug the elbows in. Tilt forward. Lead with the crown. Roll over the back toes. Bend into the right knee. Lift the left leg. Lower. Lift. Lower. Keep your formation. Lift. Pick up the torso. Pull the left knee through. Release down. Malasana. Last time, last side. You guys are crushing it. Grab the block with your elbows. Come to a sumo squat. Squat. Kick the left leg. Squat. Kick the left leg. Squat. Kick the left leg. Curl the heel in. Take the block to the foot. Get a good grip. Woo, losing that block. Get a good grip. Tilt forward. Warrior three. Pick it up. Warrior three. Pick it up. Warrior three. Place the hands down carefully, slower than you want to. Lower the left knee to the floor. Step the right foot back. Come down onto your forearms. Forearm plank. Lower down. forearm swings. Adjust as needed to get back up to your dolphin with the left leg lifted. Kink the right forearm over for balance. Very carefully grab your block, place it at the front of the mat. Parallel forearms. Springy lizard, look forward, inhale. Exhale, load your spring, pop, left foot, outside of left hand. Pick up the block, crescent pose, we're almost there. Take the block to your head, hug the elbows in, press the crown forward, 45 degrees. Roll over the back toes, bend into the left knee. Lift the right leg off from the inner thigh, lower. Keep the formation, lift, lower. One more time, lift, pull the right knee through, lower down into Malasana, releasing the block to the floor. Whew. Sit down. Crushed it. All right, so time for the workshop. As promised, we are doing supported headstand with the option to take it in a double stack. And I say the option, I don't know why I'm turning all around, but I say the option because in general, I do think it's a little bit harder to take this variation, especially if you're having trouble stacking the hips over the shoulder. So I will show the egg entrance, and then I will show this one, and I will also show some fun challenges and also just some dumb challenges if you just are feeling like doing that today. So watch first, and then I will guide us through it all together, as well as give you a minute or two to play with this. We've done all aspects of this already. This idea of formation of the ribs, the pelvis, neutral, nice core engagement, the glutes working because your butt is working to get that hip extension, even if it's only the one hip. We also want the crown pushing down, the forearms pushing down, the elbows hugging in. We've heard these things so many times. You're like, shut up, stop saying them already. But it's hard to think of them when we're doing them upside down. So hopefully they're so drilled into your body by now that they start to feel natural. So if you're doing the egg variation, it will look like interlacing the hands, hugging the elbows in, forearms as close to the knees as is comfortable. Place the crown down, tuck the toes, walk the hips in. Control going up into supported headstands. I don't like to say never or always, but in general, I never teach kicking wildly up to headstand because of the neck. So walk the feet in. You never have to go up to headstand. You never do. Curl one heel in like you're holding the block. Push down through the crown of the head, push down through the forearms. Lift the shoulders away from the ground. Stay here. Maybe you switch the legs out. If you want to go up, curl one heel in like you're squeezing the block. Lift the other like you're squeezing a block. Notice I didn't kick. This wasn't this like wild thing happening here. Pull, pull. Hug the elbows towards the midline. Stay here. Find your balance. If you really want to go up to straight because you feel that is really important in your practice, you can squeeze the butt, squeeze the legs. Don't care what you do with your feet. Just make sure they're active. We come out the same way we came in. Lower. Child's pose. And then that marble push. The longer we're in headstand, the longer it's nice to stay in that child's pose and take that transition. Now, if you want to try the double stag variation from today, it's just what we've been doing. We essentially set up for it when we were in our downward facing dog and we stopped to do headstand prep. So that looks like all the same steps at the beginning. Walk the feet in to stack the hips, bending the knees as much as you need to. And then instead of just curling the heel in, we also reach the knee to the sky. The tendency here is going to be to do this and just kind of be loose and then to kick the other leg up. Not what we're going for. We want to think about those blocks. Squeeze, knee up. This knee pulls up. The forearms push down, the crown of the head pushes down until we're here. This thigh, the bottom thigh, stays in close to the low belly. Because if I take it away, look what happens. Whoop! I can go into this loose, sad position here where I can't find core engagement. Whereas if I pull this thigh in, I can't really do that. Top knee up, curl the heel in, bottom knee down towards the belly. You can practice switching slowly and with control, and then lowering down. One more option, the block. I don't suggest you do it with two blocks, one on each side, because it gets a little bit complex, because at some point you do have to straighten the legs a little bit to stack the hips and you'll lose the block, but you can do it with one. Zoom, zoom. Actually, I'm gonna do it with my good leg. My left hamstring's tired. So set yourself up, boom, boom, boom. Lift the knee up. Again, try to avoid jumping. It's this controlled lift. Push down to the crown, push down. Here we are.
Again, I said if you wanted a stupid challenge, it can be to try to switch the block to the other side. That is a very dumb challenge. But again, one thing I love about Carson is he always has this ridiculous, playful nature in his teaching and practice. So if you want to get weird and switch the block while still maintaining your formation, of course, you can switch the block however you want to. Slowly lower, regardless of what you're doing. Child's pose, nose forward. Ready? Do it, huh? Okay, remember, you don't have to do any of these. You can stop in the prep pose. I will guide people through the non-block variation of the double stack. If you want to do another one, you'll do another one. And then we'll have a few minutes to play. So take your hands, hug your elbows in. Don't forget about all the things we've done thus far. Place your forearms down at a comfortable distance from your knee. Crown of the head, down. Push the crown into the ground. Step the toes, walk the hips in. Bend the knees as much as you need to. Hug the elbows in, push through the crown, push through the forearms. Lift the shoulders away from the floor. Choose a leg, curl that heel in towards the sit bone. Then send the knee up to the sky. From here, only if it feels right, push down through the forearms a little bit more and curl the other heel in, coming to the double stag position. Keep the lower thigh close to the low belly, like you're squeezing a block also between your thigh and your low belly. Curl the top heel towards the sit bone. If you want to experiment with switching, you can. If you're not going all the way up, don't worry about it. Whenever you're ready, slowly lower with control. So only hold the headstand to the point you could still slowly lower with control. Rest in your child's pose for a moment. And then with that marble, push the nose forward and come up to a seat. Okay, I invite you to spend another minute or two, maybe trying the other side if you did that double stag leg, or just simply trying it again, or another variation. If you want to grab the block in one of your legs to try going up, be my guest. If you want to be extra silly and try to transfer the block between your legs, just be wary of the neck and the spine. Keep your formation, keep the elbows hugging in, and keep the pressure of the forearms down and the shoulders lifting up. So play time for another minute before we cool down together. Go for it. Slowly, safely, doing whatever you want. Another 30 seconds or so here, wherever here is for you. Take your time. And then as you're ready, make your way into child's pose. Maybe just taking the arms back along your side, as long as that feels okay on the neck. If that feels like too much pressure on the neck, keep the arms out in front of you so that they help take some weight off the neck. Stay here, just resting for a few moments. Imagine you have a marble in front of your nose, press it forward with your nose, gently pick your head up, and make your way onto your belly. You got to do a little bit of neutralizing and countering, but first just rest one cheek on the mat here in this extended position.
And gently turn your head to the other side. Just resting on your belly. Come up to a very gentle Sphinx pose. So on your forearms, elbows mostly under the shoulders. Let the top of the feet be heavy. Push the pubic bone down. Squeeze the butt lightly. Stabilize the low spine. Very carefully push the back of the skull back like you're trying to give yourself a double chin. Keep the head pressing back. If it feels good to pull the shoulders gently onto the back body. And you could still keep the pubic bone pressing down. Go for it. Very carefully. Drop the right ear towards the right shoulder. Try not to hike the right shoulder up towards the ear, but just let the ear fall to the shoulder. You can experiment here with maybe taking the chin slightly up and forward towards the top right corner of your mat. Even trying to give yourself an underbite. So I know it sounds silly, but reaching your lower jaw forward, and you'll find that that changes the stretch where you feel it in your neck. And then maybe you try to tilt your chin slightly down and push the back of the skull back more, and that changes where you might feel it. Take your head back to neutral. Push the back of the skull back gently. Drip the left ear towards the left shoulder. Be here for a moment. Maybe you tilt the chin slightly up towards the top left corner of your mat, and even think about that underbite motion, reaching the lower jaw forward. Maybe you tilt the chin slightly down towards the sternum. Notice how that changes the stretch. Bring the head back to neutral. If it feels good to rock the head from side to side, maybe avoiding the full circle if it doesn't feel good to send it back behind you, but just those half circles in front. Stretching out through the back of the neck. Release all the way to your belly. Take your arms down along your side. Last little moment of effort here before we get into some softer postures. One locus to fire up the back body with the arms more in extension. So push the pubic bone down. Your legs can be together at hip distance. Think about lifting up through the inner thighs. Lift everything off the ground except for your hip bones and your pubic bone. Push the back of the skull back. Imagine someone has a rope around your wrist and is pulling your wrist towards your heels. Lift up more through the inner thighs. Fire up the back body. Push the pubic bone down. One more inhale, lift a little higher. And exhale, soften down. Place the right arm in a cactus position. Elbow coming directly out from the right shoulder. Tent the left fingertips. Curl the left heel towards the sit bone softly, not like you're squeezing the block. And roll onto your right side body, giving yourself a little pec stretch, only going so far as it feels good. You can take your left toes behind you like a kickstand. Release your right cheek to the mat. If it feels better to just let the left leg hang heavy over the right, or I like this weird figure 4 position to support myself. Send the breath into the front of the right shoulder. As an attention point, knowing that the breath can't actually go to the right shoulder, it can only go to your lungs. But the attention can go there. Carefully release to your belly. Let's take it to the other side. Left arm out in a cactus, elbow directly out from the shoulder. Tense your right fingertips, curl your right heel in towards your sit bone. Roll onto your left side body, maybe using those right toes as a kickstand. or just releasing the right leg down, or doing this weird figure 4 kickstand. Sending the attention and the expansion of the breath into the front of the left shoulder. Roll onto your belly, only to come onto your back body, keeping your blocks nearby. Plant the soles of your feet. One more glute bridge, but this time we'll come to supported. So find your formation. Push down to the heels, lift up just enough to slide the block either on low or medium setting underneath your sacrum. Not your low back, your sacrum. Keep the length as you place your sacrum down onto the block. Your choice to stay here and just relax, maybe taking your arms out to a cactus. Or if you'd like to carefully take one leg to the sky and then the other, that might feel nice. The legs worked hard for us today. Give them a moment to drain. If this feels strenuous in the low back, come down and adjust the block perhaps a little bit lower, finding the length through the tailbone first before resting on the block. Your legs don't have to be very engaged. They can be floating like they're stuck in mud. Toes can be soft, or maybe just a tiny wiggle if that feels good. Gently pushing the back of the skull into the mat. Just to reiterate use of the neck musculature. Softly lower the feet to the floor. Push down enough to lift the hips off the block, keeping the block still somewhat nearby. Leave the left foot planted, right sole of the foot towards the sky. Reach and grab wherever is comfortable, maybe the right thigh, the right calf, or the ankle. Light hamstring stretch here. Maybe softening the foot instead of going for that really flexed foot, which can lead to some nerve limitations for the stretch, but a soft foot. Being gentle, keeping at least a micro bend in the knee. If it feels good to straighten the left leg, you can do that on the floor. Keeping the left toes mostly facing the sky. Take this into a twist. Cross the right leg over towards the left, adjusting as needed. Trying to leave both shoulders on the ground. And you do have your block, so if you need to rest your right ankle or inner thigh or knee on a block, you can do so. If you prefer a different variation of twist, that's fine. Just a little ringing action of the spine. Release. Plant the sole of the right foot. Extend the left leg towards the sky. Reach wherever is comfortable for you. Hamstring stretch on the left side. Maybe again softening through the ankle so we're not flexing the foot as much as we usually do. So there's not necessarily this nerve limitation. We're getting more stretch in the hamstring. Maybe. Micro bend in the knee. If it feels right to slowly straighten the right leg, toes staying towards the sky, go for it. Take this into a twist, left leg over towards the right. Again, you can use your blocks if you need something to support underneath a knee. Keeping both shoulders mostly down if that feels okay. unwind. If you want any other finishing postures, now is the time to take them. If you would like to finish with a short heart bench before we do a standard Shavasana, I like to take my heart bench with both my blocks on the medium setting. You can always knock your upper block to the lower setting, or you can knock both blocks to the low setting for less of a bend. This is a big shoulder opener, especially if you're going to cactus the arms. The lower block will go on the back of the shoulder blades, and the upper block goes at the back of the skull. So adjusting your blocks as needed. From here, pushing down to the heels, length through the tailbone, same thing as always, finding that neutral pelvis. And then I cactus my arms, but as you can see, that's a really big opener of the chest. So if at any point you get any numbness or this is just uncomfortable in the front of the shoulders, you can adjust, hands on your belly, or even arms directly overhead might feel a little bit less. Of course, you can always come out of this or simply put the blocks on a lower setting. If you need another posture outside of this heart bench, go for it. Trying to melt as much as possible over the blocks, which sometimes is a hard sensation. When we do heart bench over soft blanket rolls, it can be a little bit easier to find this looseness or this melting. So doing a scan from your toes up through the crown of the head, and seeing if there's anything you can soften. We found a lot of engagement today. There's constant hugging of the heel in towards the sit bone, which perhaps isn't something that you're necessarily always aware of. The pelvic positioning, the elbows hugging towards the midline. There was so much engagement. Can you soften something now? The weight of the pelvis into the floor, still lengthening through the low back. The weight of the back of the heart into the block. The elbows heavy towards the mat or towards the floor. And the back of the skull, supported but heavy on the block. All this hugging in of the elbows is important. This adduction of the elbows is important for headstand because they do run away, leaving us a little bit unbalanced and also not just utilizing the shoulder musculature to the most of its abilities, but it also does bring a lot of tightness to some already tighter muscles of the pecs and so maybe some of the deeper pecs. Taking this time to soften can help us get through some of those more superficial muscles into the ones a little deeper, closer to the joints. If you're still in heart bench with me, carefully remove the blocks and come into your final resting pose for just a few moments. And your final resting pose can look like whatever you want it to. Standard Shavasana, finding a little length through the tailbone before you soften, constructive rest. Or maybe you want to take Shavasana on your belly today or on your side. Eyes open, closed, or softly half-lidded. Take the next few moments in silence to simply let your natural breath take over, perhaps not even noticing that. And just be still and here on your mat. Slowly coming back to the breath. Re-noticing that your natural inhales and your natural exhales expand and soften the ribs. They were there all along. But how lucky that, unlike many of the things that we have to watch in our supported headstand, they continue, for the most part, without any intervention or conscious thought. Bring tiny movements to the fingers and the toes. Gently roll the wrists and the ankles, inviting in any cracks or creaks, pops. Stretch your arms long overhead. Find length from your fingers to your toes. And as you exhale, pull your knees into your low belly just to roll to one side. Staying here for just a moment. Allowing yourself to transition out of the practice just as softly and sweetly as you transitioned in. Roll a little bit more to the side and push your way to a comfortable seat, whatever that means for you. Eyes open, closed, half-lidded, whatever is comfortable. In your comfortable seat, one more time, find your formation, lengthen through the tail, lift up through the pubic bone. Take one hand to your belly and one hand to your heart, doesn't matter which. Gently press the back of the skull back. And ever so slightly, squeeze the sit bones towards the midline. Crown lifts to the sky. Sit bones drill down to the earth. Let's finish with one communal breath here. Exhale the air out of the mouth. Deep inhale through the nose. Feel yourself expand 360 degrees, not just up through the chest, but also through the belly, through the sides, through the back. Hold at the top. Relax the space between your eyebrows, and without slouching or shrinking, pour the air out of the mouth. Release your hands. Lift your chin. And if your eyes are not open, gently open your eyes. Thank you so much for practicing this supported headstand mini workshop / class today. We are now going to take a minute to go over some of the details of it, do a little sequence analysis. I'm going to give you guys the flow, and yeah, we'll answer any questions too. So let me get uncomfortably close to the camera because yeah. All right. Hello. Okay, so if you are new to all of this, I'm going to drop in the chat box the document that has this flow for you to keep, as well as all of the information about what we're going to talk about. So there's no need for you to look at the document right now. It is just a resource for you to take home that goes into more detail than we are actually going to talk about right now. Because I'm going to pull up a brief PowerPoint presentation for you that's going to go over some of the key points that I hope you take away, because sequencing is very complex, and this is a 200-hour, and if you're just starting out as a teacher and you're just starting out with creative vinyasa, regardless, it can be a lot, and it never needs to be this complex, but it can be if that's something that interests you. So let me attach the file. It is a Word document, so if you don't have Word, I will also send a PDF to Alan to put in the spreadsheet. Okay. So it should have sent to everyone, and that is for you to look at later. In the meantime, let me pull up the PowerPoint and then share my screen. All right. we are going to share the screen. Desktop. Boom. Cool. And let me move this over and find the chat box. Pull that over. And then go into the PowerPoint itself. If I can't see this thing, there we go, slideshow. Play from the start. Okay. So, supported headstand. That is what we did. Of course, we used a variation of supported headstand. And authentic movements is all about using logical creativity on the mat, which hopefully you could see was reflected in a little bit of this class. Sometimes the longer the class, the more we can put in posture mimics and work our way up to things. But you can also do it in these short classes. And we want you to know that, because these days, if you're teaching in the studio, it's probably going to be a shorter class. And yes, if you have to go, don't worry about it. You can have this information for later. All right, so again, this is a review for some of you who have seen us other weeks and maybe not. We're just gonna go quickly through it. All of this information is already in your sheet. Sequencing, it can be super complex or super simple. So maybe you're in a school that gives you a sequence, that's pretty simple, although there's a lot of complexity to those sequences that have been worked out for many, many years. If you're creating your own sequence though, it can be very simple. There's no need for it to be complex, but it can be if that's something that interests you. It can be highly personalized, or it can be more universal. So you can make something for yourself that's very, very specific to your needs. You can make something for a private client that's very, very specific to their needs. Or if you're teaching in a public class, even if something is labeled as an all levels class, you tend to have all kinds of people show up. So you have to make it a little bit more all levels or all access, which means providing some stepping stones and modifications so that people can build up to postures, but they can also have things to refer back to if a posture perhaps gets outside of their comfort zone. And in these shorter classes, instead of taking the time to then stop and demo all the modifications for them, you don't have to, because you've essentially already done them in the posture mimic. So you can be like, hey, instead of this standing half moon, remember when we did it in a tabletop? Well, you can do that if that's calling to you more than the final posture. And sequencing can be very enjoyable, even if it seems overwhelming at first. And again, you know yourself better than anyone. So if you want to jump in and try to create these really ornate sequences, go for it. But know that that is 100% not required. And when I first started sequencing, I definitely started a little bit more on the simple side, using kind of a sun A, B skeleton, expanding out from there. You can do so much with a sun A and B, just tweaking it a little bit, maybe towards back bends or towards hips, something like that. Simple sequencing to work for you. All right. Well, there we go. There is no right way to sequence. So again, different schools have different things they like to do, but there are so many different methods to craft an effective practice. And part of progressing as a practitioner is learning which to call on for a certain audience or need, plus the ones that you enjoy teaching. If you don't enjoy teaching a certain kind of sequencing, it probably comes across to your students at some point. So find something that resonates for you. And yes, while you do have to generally sequence for your audience, I found that it is more effective as a teacher to find something that you enjoy sequencing in a way, in a method that you enjoy sequencing. And essentially, if you have that capability, start to let the audience come to you who like that style. For example, I am not someone who likes to do the same sequence again and again. Could I teach one of those schools that perhaps has a set sequence? Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily enjoy it. So I teach creative vinyasa, and not everyone loves it. That's fine. There's lots of different kinds of yoga, and that's one of the beauties of yoga, is everyone can start to explore these different avenues and find something that resonates with them. I have a dance and gymnastics and art background, and I like this creative movement. And I found that there's other people who do too. So if you have that capability, because I recognize that's a privilege, and not everyone has the time to find and build their audience versus just going in and teaching in a public class, taking the time to let your people come to you and let your passion shine through is really wonderful. All right, today we did peak pose sequencing. You did some dynamic sequencing with Bianca, and then I did a peak transition sequence with you guys who are in the July 15th group, and if you're in the August group, well, then we'll do it next week. So we did a pose today, and then we added in some variations. The peak pose, and I realized that this picture is not accurate because we did the double stag variation, but you can still start to utilize it for the benefit that we're trying to get out of it. The peak pose is supported headstand with double stag legs, and we added in the additional challenge of switch the legs and or hold the block while you switch the legs. So understanding a peak pose and peak pose sequencing for things like this can be really helpful, because once we have an idea of where we want to go, the peak posture, and specifically what that peak posture looks like today we didn't just do supported headstand, we did that double stag variation. So we had a very specific peak in mind, which means we can then work backwards and start to structure the class by thinking about the different joint components and the different needs and even the different tendencies for that peak. So looking at a picture like this is a little diagram that we utilize a lot in our teacher trainings, is thinking about a posture first from the joint perspectives. You know, what are these different joints doing? And I know you talked about that with Irene in anatomy, or you're going to talk about that with Irene in anatomy if you're new. But looking at what's happening in the ankle, what's happening in the knees, how about the pelvis, the shoulders, the shoulder blades, maybe the elbows and the wrists. So thinking about what's happening at each different joint of the body is going to be helpful. So when we look at joint actions or components of today's peak pose, we have a lot of complexity. And again, if you haven't done anatomy yet, don't worry so much about the terms. You know the position that the arms were in, even if you don't know the anatomical terms. And your students probably don't know them either. So you don't necessarily have to know these anatomical terms. It's about understanding where things are in space and then finding ways to mimic that to a lesser degree before the peak. So our arms, we were in overhead shoulder flexion with a bend at the elbow, so flexion of the elbow, and adduction. And that just simply means hugging towards the midline, right? We were trying to get there, and you saw that reflected everywhere throughout class. Core integration in general. We had this big thing about setting up our formation, which played into our pelvis as well. We wanted length through the tailbone, lift up through the pubic bone, the ribs softening in. And by doing that, hopefully the core just naturally worked. But that is something that we tend to lose a lot in our headstand. Then we have hips, and the hips were a bit complex. So in something like typical straight up supported headstand, we may have just extension of the hips, so that straight legs to the sky. But we had one hip in extension and one hip in flexion, or compressed, we'll call it. And because we had that top leg in more extension and the bottom leg more in a compressed position, we were able to maintain the pelvis a little bit more by keeping the thigh really close to the low belly. We had obviously hamstring engagement. So we had flexion of the knees as we held the block, and then even when we didn't hold the block. And then there's some things that are less anatomical terms and more just overall. So again, you don't need to know these fancy anatomy terms. We had pressure through the crown of the head, right? So that's something that is probably great to invite into class at some point or multiple points before we actually get into the peak posture. We had this idea of active legs, and you were forced to have active legs by constantly hugging the block. So whether the legs were straight or whether they were bent, we were having active legs. Even when our supported leg was in something like those nasty little warrior 3 dips up and down, we made sure to keep at least a small bend in the knees so that the musculature of the legs was working and we're not just necessarily stacking bone on bone. Then there's some things that are less anatomical terms or joint related and more just considered components of the peak. Proprioception, where are you in space? Are your hips stacked over your shoulders? Because maybe for you, or definitely for some of your students, that can be a really big challenge. So understanding that and trying to work in some sense of where your hips are in this pose, where the crown of your head is, are your elbows actually hugging in? Especially when we go upside down, we can lose those things a lot. And finally, fear factor, right? Headstand is scary because you could fall, and it's really kind of unpleasant to fall from headstand. It's not like handstand where you can just do a little turn. If we roll and we're in the supported grip and you roll over your fingers, it's uncomfortable, which is why often I don't invite any kicking or jumping, and it's more of a slow controlled motion. When you keep the thigh into the low belly of the one leg, it makes it even harder to fall over backwards because the pelvis stays and the core stays in this tight compressed position. So yes, it might be harder to find some balance, but it's also harder to fall over. So those are some components. There's probably more. And it goes into a little bit more detail about all of these in your paperwork. Then we think about, okay, common tendencies, because if we think about things that people generally do, so stereotypes, if you will, about what's going to happen in your class, then you can help prepare for those by introducing more accessible ways to eliminate those tendencies and also introducing cues. Now, it's important to note that, again, not every pose is right for every body, and people may need to modify the posture in a way for their specific body and their specific background that maybe isn't necessarily exactly what you're looking for. In the end, people probably know their body better than you do. So you can give people direction, but at some point you have to let them decide for themselves. Common tendencies here would be loss of the rib and pelvic relationship, this idea of dumping forward with the pelvis and the ribs flaring out, which can, not always, but can lead to core loss. And when we lead to the loss of that integration of all the abdominal muscles, obviously it's harder to balance upside down. We can rush the entrance and the exit. So again, it doesn't have to be anatomical terms. Sometimes we just go too fast. We're like excited to get up to headstand. So we fling ourselves up there or we fling ourselves down. That's a big tendency. Like, I held headstand, now I'm gonna flop down and yank my head up, and suddenly the next day I have a little kink in my neck, right? Not always, but sometimes. Elbows abduct. That's referring to this idea of the elbows running away from the midline. You can imagine if you were upside down in this position and the elbows start to run away from the midline, how suddenly you don't have these nice points of balance between the hands, the head, and the elbows. The elbows run away, boom, boom, boom. Sometimes we fall over. It also just doesn't integrate using all of the muscles of the shoulder girdles. When we hug in, you can feel how your chest turns on a little bit more. We've got these big muscles on the chest, and we might as well have them work for us. Sinking in the neck, crown, shoulders. When we get tired or when we're just not aware, we sink and we slouch. And when we're upside down, that weight goes into the crown. So this idea of pushing the forearms down really firmly, pushing the crown down firmly, as we did in today's class, and lifting the shoulders away from the ears slightly is going to help with a little bit of muscular integration there. You'd be surprised, people do not know where the crown of their head is. Whew. Or they think they do, but again, it's that proprioception issue. When they go to put the crown of the head on the floor, it doesn't necessarily hit there, and they can't tell that they're right at the top of the head. They end up here, they end up here, here, the back of the head, crazy positions. Wait till you teach headstand if you haven't already in a public setting, and you're like, what is happening here? So if you need to stop and tell people to put their finger on the crown of their head and then put their head down so that finger is replaced with the floor, go ahead and do so. Proprioception issues. So a lot of people think that it's scary to stack the hips up over the shoulders. That's what you require to then be able to balance and pull the legs in. But it is kind of scary because it's that tipping point. So they don't walk the hips in as much, maybe consciously or subconsciously. And then they find they can't float that other foot up. So that's where that kicking and jumping comes into effect. And it's like, suddenly I can't get up into headstand. But really, if I just walk my feet in a little closer, bending my knees as much as I need to, I might be able to get up there. Legs, glutes, and active. That could be at the beginning or once you're up. If the legs and the glutes are floppy and inactive, we know that it's going to make it harder to balance. But we forget that when we're upside down, which leads into the last tendency, fear of going upside down. Sometimes the mind just goes blank. So what do? Hopefully we introduce a lot of these movements and cues previously so the body is aware of what to do. That goes into carry through cues or the cues that you hear so many times that you want to punch me by the end of the class. But know that I'm generally saying them because I need them. And if I need them, probably at least one other person needs them. So we have these top 3 cues: lengthen the tailbone down, tone the glutes, exhale and melt the low ribs in, lift up through the pubic bone. And I refer to this idea as get in formation. I've used this in my other class too. It's this rib and pelvic relationship. If you set someone up in a really accessible position, like we did in the really low glute bridge at the beginning, and you reaffirm a few times that this is get in formation, then you can stop saying all those other words every single time and simply tell people that shorter phrase, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be get in formation. Someone once referred to that in one of our teacher trainings while playing the Beyonce song, and that's just what's stuck in my head now. So whenever I think get in formation, I think about that position. We have this idea, I don't think I said squeeze an orange behind your knee, but squeeze the block. So heel to bum. So when we squeeze the block, we constantly have that hamstring engagement. And then when we took the block away, we were hopefully still able to find that push down through the crown and the forearms. There was this constant cueing whenever we were in a mimic pose where we were pushing through the forearms so that we could find a little bit of elevation and lift through the shoulders, and we were pushing through the crown, whether that was into the floor, into the block, or simply forward into space. Hug the elbows to the midline. You probably heard that a million times. And simply this idea of slow it down. I said, go slower than you want to. Go slower than you want to. We had this option of, if you prefer to leave the other foot on the floor, that's great too. So just this reaffirmation through the whole class that you never have to go into the peak posture. It's really not that important. It's 100% your choice. So that when we do get there, people don't feel peer pressured to necessarily do something that isn't right for their body. All right. Then we have the idea of regression and progression. So this is posture mimics. You have all this explained in your paperwork. It's simply this idea of taking the peak pose, taking pieces of it and putting them in more accessible variations in order. So you can introduce these movements so that you can introduce this form or this shape. So we had a glute bridge. We did nasty things in the glute bridge, hug the knee in. We had forearm tabletop cat cow where we did our head push, the locust. We had our child's pose where we hovered the arms, dolphin with our headstand arms. We had the prep pose that we took right from our downward facing dog. We had the nasty Utthita Asana, which is the standing pose where we pulled the knee in where we were here, and then we rotated back and forth from our warrior 3 to the block squeeze. So we had a variety, and there were probably more in there depending on how many pieces you want to look at. And then the progressions, we did the stag leg switches with black holds. We did not do the optional pincha lift up, but as you can see, we did the block switches back and forth between the thigh if you wanted to be silly. Another thing you could do is holding that double stag variation. You could push down so much to the forearms that you could lift up through the head and come into pincha, or for forearm stand, pincha mayurasana, another variation with the hands and supported headstand. So that is another option. You can always think about progressions or regressions. Then we have this idea of neutralizing and countering. So when we talk about neutralizing and countering, it's not necessarily necessary for every single class. However, when we spend a lot of time in one shape or one type of shape, it is nice to let the body return to more of a neutral. You can think about neutral as something like Tadasana or Shavasana, so a neutral or anatomical position, just standing there, to let us return to neutral before we then go into countering. And the joints that we tend to look at for these are the same joints that we look at when we look at components. So the main joint sets and the worthy mentions. Of course, the neck in something like today's class probably moves out of worthy mention into a main joint set, especially if we're doing the pressure down. Just got stung by a wasp. That was fun. I'm in an old barn, so that's fun. So especially since we're doing the pressure down to the crown, we would probably move the neck to the main joint sets. So the neutralizing we did today, we held a child's pose after we played in our headstand. And then we had this idea of the marble push to kind of give a little bit of love. If you maybe had the shoulders back, that might have given a little neutral release to the shoulders since they were just down by the side. Then we took our time in that Sphinx pose. We really took our time with that gentle head tilt. That was also helping us find a little bit more extension to the spine, since we did spend a decent amount of time in flexion of the spine today, or rounding as we were in our forearm planks and things like that. We did our low locust with the arms back to find some neutralizing through the shoulders and the spine. Again, returning more to this neutral position. We even just rested on our belly with one cheek down and then the other. And then finally, we did some countering where we were focused on this idea of adduction, hugging towards the midline. We went into prone shoulder stretch, abduction away from the midline to stretch through the shoulders. We then did hip extension, which I know we did a little bit of in today's class. So again, today was a little bit complex, but we did some hip extension through our bridge, and then we took our legs up in the air just because it was nice after having all of that activation of the legs. We did the twist where we worked on our spine. We also added in the hamstring component of pulling the leg into the body. And then finally, we ended with a little heart bench, which helped us counter or take the opposite motion, more extension of the spine and the shoulders were brought into more of this, again, abduction. So we did a little countering and neutralizing, depending on how long you're in different postures, depending on how intense and how deep you go into different postures. That's going to dictate how long you need to spend in countering and neutralizing. But today was pretty quick because there was a quicker class. So that is the end of my little PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to close the screen share, but I did want to open it up for about 5 minutes or so. If anybody does have any questions, again, you have all this information and more in your sequence analysis. And you're always welcome to shoot me an email with any questions. It's just info@Authentic Movements, and myself or someone else will get back to you. But let me see if I got any questions in here before. Strength in my neck. I also have weak hamstrings, man. Did anybody else find that really hard on one side versus another? Or hard on both sides? Yeah, my left one is just like, no. And it's so funny because in my brain, I'm like, squeeze the block, squeeze it. And my left heel is just like, no, thank you. No, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Do we have any questions? And you can also ask to be unmuted and talk to me. That's fine too. Let's see. Can I unmute everyone? So you guys can feel free to ask any questions. I hear somebody. I unmuted you all. You can mute yourself again if that pleases you. But how are you so casual about a wasp sting? You guys didn't see it? It's just a little one. It got me.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I'm not sensitive at all to wasp or bee sting, so that'll probably go in like 5 or 6 minutes. If it was my husband, I'm gonna say it's because I'm not sensitive to it, but if it was my husband, he would be very upset. But he does get a bigger welt, so it was just a little one. He got me. Again, I'm in the old barn. I'm surprised our snake didn't come
With
up.
the snake.
Yeah, he was up in the other corner all morning, but he does keep the mice away. I wish he would have beaten the wasp, but it's better than the dungeon room that I filmed in for the first week. So. Any other questions about this style of weird sequencing, about today's class, anything at all for you wonderful people? No. Everyone's always so quiet online. All right, well, thank you so much for practicing. I will actually be back next week. I won't see some of you again if you were in, there's another one. If you were in the July 15th program, I won't see you again. I'm sorry, but I hope to see you again in the future for some other event. And if you are new, then I'll see you next week for our reaching and rolling flow, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, then you'll go back to Irene and Bianca, and then we'll see after that. So thank you so much for joining me today and for practicing with Authentic Movements. Y'all are awesome. It was really fun to gaze up there and see everybody doing all the weird stuff with the block. So I'll see you again soon and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.